My name is Mara. I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family only ever had room for one child. My older brother, Ryan. It's strange, growing up, feeling invisible. Not because of anything you did, but because of everything you weren't. My childhood wasn't abusive in the traditional sense. There were no slamming doors or screaming matches. The pain came softly, wrapped in silence, casual dismissals, and smiles that never quite reached me. Ryan was the golden child. He had charm, intelligence, the kind of effortless charisma people notice from a mile away. He played sports, aced his exams, led student council, and somehow still found time to win over every adult in the room. When Ryan brought home a B, my parents would say, "He's just got a lot on his plate." When I brought home straight A's, all but one, my mother would frown. "Why couldn't you push a little harder on this one, Mara?" There's one Christmas I'll never forget. I was 12, Ryan, 16. I'd been dreaming of a guitar I'd seen at the local music store. I talked about it constantly, left magazines open on the dining table, even drew little chords in my notebook at dinner. Ryan wanted a new mountain bike, expensive, sleek, loud. Christmas morning came. Ryan tore into his wrapping paper to find the exact bike he'd described, complete with personalized grips and his initials carved on the frame. I unwrapped my gift slowly. Beneath the festive paper were socks, plain, beige, soft, but silent. "We weren't sure what you'd like," Mom said casually. "You never really ask for much." That was the moment it truly hit me. They didn't forget me because they didn't love me. They forgot me because I wasn't the child they wanted me to be. I stopped competing with Ryan after that. It was pointless. He was the son my father boasted about to golf buddies. I was something else, an asterisk, a placeholder, a daughter in a house that didn't know how to value one. By the time I turned 20, I didn't leave in anger. I just left. No dramatic speech, no accusation, just a note on the kitchen table. "Thanks for everything. I'll figure it out." And I did. I worked, bike shops, mechanic garages, picked up digital skills, learned systems design, built things with my hands and my mind. Not glamorous, not shiny, but real. Still, I called home. Still showed up on holidays. Still brought gifts, even when they got left behind unopened. I told myself they were just old school, that they didn't mean to overlook me, but deep down, the ache stayed, a constant quiet reminder that I was never enough. Then one day, Ryan sent an invitation. Dad's 60th birthday party, held at an upscale golf club, the kind of place where shoes cost more than my rent. The invite read, "Hosted by Ryan, honoring our father, Robert." My name wasn't mentioned, not once. I thought about ignoring it, but some part of me, the part that still hoped for even a flicker of acknowledgement, said maybe this time would be different. I picked out my best blouse, got a haircut, even rehearsed a little toast in the mirror, knowing full well I'd never get the chance to give it. I didn't expect a standing ovation, just a look, a nod, something that said, "You matter." But the moment I stepped into that ballroom, filled with laughter, music, and the scent of expensive perfume, I knew I was still a ghost, invisible, forgotten. Nothing had changed. I was 15 when I truly understood what it meant to be unwanted, not unloved in that quiet, distant way some people just drift apart. No, I mean unwanted. The kind where your presence makes a room colder, where every word you say feels like an interruption, like you're a guest in a house that shares your last name. It was my brother Ryan's 17th birthday. Dad had gone all out, rented a hall, invited what felt like half the town, and ordered a custom cake shaped like a full-sized soccer ball. Because of course, Ryan was the high school football star, the golden boy, captain of the team, the straight-A student when it counted, the one with charm, looks, and that effortless way of making people like him without even trying. And me, I was the girl who forgot to sweep the garage one weekend and was still getting passive-aggressive comments about it 2 months later. The one who read too much, who kept a notebook of short stories under her bed, the one who always made the dinner table conversations too serious. That night, it carved something permanent in me. Mom had asked me to help set up the decorations, and I did. Quietly, I strung up streamers, blew up the balloons until my fingers were sore, folded all the napkins into triangles, and lined up the silverware like it was a royal banquet. No one noticed. No one even said thanks. When the party started, Ryan made his grand entrance like a prince, walking into his own coronation. Everyone clapped. Dad nearly knocked his drink over trying to hug him. And then something small, but sharp, happened. Dad pulled me aside while the music played, and the guests flooded in. "Mara," he said, glancing quickly over his shoulder, "just don't make this about you, all right? Let your brother have his night." I blinked. I wasn't. He cut me off with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, just saying, "Don't be weird, mingle, smile, but stay in the background, okay?" That would have been enough to hurt. But then came the gifts. Ryan opened box after box. A brand new top-tier laptop, sneakers worth more than my entire closet, a sleek engraved leather wallet, and finally, a $500 check tucked into a card that said, "To our pride." I sat on the edge of a folding chair, trying not to look confused. I'd asked for a used laptop 6 months earlier, for school, not for show. And Mom had told me gently that it just wasn't in the budget. And then, with a grin, Mom clapped her hands and said, "Time for the video montage." I should have been excited. I'd spent 2 weeks editing a birthday video for Ryan. I'd gone through old VHS tapes, digitized them, added music, added transitions. I stayed up late, tweaking the voiceovers, trying to make it funny and heartfelt. But the video they played, it wasn't mine. It was a low-res compilation thrown together by one of Dad's co-workers. Just grainy football clips with mismatched audio and random applause tracks. I sat in the back of the room, my USB still in my pocket, heart racing and face burning. Later that night, after the last guest left and the cake had been wrapped up in foil, I finally asked Mom, "Did you get the video I made? I sent it to you last week." She didn't even pause, just wiped the counter and said, "Oh, that? Yeah." Ryan didn't like the tone, said it was too soft, too much talking. He wanted something with more energy. Software, like me. The next morning, I checked my email. There it was, an e-card birthday invite. Not from my parents, not even from Ryan, from my aunt. That was it. Just a forwarded link and a "hope you can make it." That was the moment it all clicked. That love in my family wasn't unconditional. It was earned, measured, graded on a curve I was never meant to pass. And I had failed. I was 17 when I realized that disappointment could wear your father's voice. Senior year was supposed to be mine. My chance to step out from Ryan's enormous shadow and finally do something that might make my parents look at me and actually see me. Not with that vague politeness or absent-minded smile, but with real pride. I worked harder than I ever had. I stayed up until 2 a.m. most nights, crafting personal statements and editing essay drafts until my eyes blurred. I didn't have a resume filled with trophies or newspaper mentions like Ryan did. I didn't score touchdowns or make honor roll speeches, but I had passion for writing, for thinking, for something deeper than just impressing people. I filled out FAFSA forms without help, applied to scholarships no one even knew about. Quietly, carefully, I sent in my dream application to Stanford, a long shot, something almost silly for someone like me. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not even my friends, just a hope I tucked away into a digital form and hit submit. Then one crisp April afternoon, I walked into the house after school and saw it. A thick envelope sitting on the kitchen table. Stanford University. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. My name was handwritten on the front. It was real. I had done something big. I turned the corner into the kitchen, still holding the envelope like it might break, and found them all there. Dad, Mom, and Ryan. Already seated, already grinning. He was holding his Stanford acceptance letter. Looks like they couldn't resist another Mitchell. he joked, tossing me that same effortless wink he'd been perfecting since middle school. Guess we're both California-bound, sis. I stared at him, at the letter in his hand, at the one still clutched in mine. Wait, I said slowly. I got in too. Dad looked up, chuckled, like I'd just told a cute little story. That's great, sweetheart, he said. But you know we can't afford to send 2 kids across the country. Ryan's got the athletic scholarship, and, well, it's just not practical. I blinked. I applied for financial aid, I said, my voice too soft. I might qualify for work study, and the admissions counselor said, Mom cut me off. Mara, honey, be realistic. That word again, realistic. Not brave, not ambitious, not passionate, just realistic. Ryan leaned back in his chair, spinning his envelope on the table like a prize. Don't take it personally, sis, he said with a smirk. You just give off more of a community college vibe. It wasn't the insult that got me. It was the ease, the way it flowed off his tongue, as natural as breathing. Like he'd been cast in a role, the achiever, and I was the forgettable supporting character. And maybe I had accepted that script too. That night, I locked my bedroom door, sat on the edge of my bed, and opened my Stanford letter. I read it again and again, every word a mix of triumph and grief. My eyes traced the sentence, "We are pleased to offer you admission to the class of 2020. I pressed my thumb into that line, like I could leave a mark, like I could prove that this moment had actually existed. Then I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath old stories, report cards, and a journal I hadn't touched in months, where it stayed for years. The day of my father's 60th birthday started with a message from my mom. Don't forget, Mara, tonight is your father's celebration. Make sure you're not late. Ryan's giving a toast, and it'd be nice if you clapped. Nice if I clapped. There it was again, that tiny stab dressed in civility. A reminder that I wasn't going to that party as a daughter. I was a prop, a seat filler, a background extra in the Ryan show. Still, I showed up, because that's what I always did. The house looked more like a country club than a home. Fancy lights strung across the yard, valet parking, waiters in tuxedos serving shrimp cocktails on trays. I wasn't surprised. Ryan had likely planned it all. He was the golden boy, after all. Mr. Promotions, Mr. Perfect. Inside, I felt like a stranger. Everyone was laughing, drinking, throwing compliments Ryan's way. No one really noticed me slip in. No hugs, no welcome, just a few nods and half smiles. And then I saw my parents. They were standing with Ryan, glowing with pride. My father had a drink in hand, laughing loudly at something Ryan just said. My mother kept touching Ryan's arm like he was a senator. When I approached, my mom looked up, surprised. Oh, Mara, you made it. Not, I'm glad you came. Not, your father missed you. Just that. Before I could even respond, Dad said, Ryan, you ready for the toast? The crowd gathered. My father introduced Ryan with words I had never heard used for me. My pride, my joy, the reason I sleep easy at night. Ryan took the mic and gave a charming, well-practiced speech about legacy, about values, about our father's greatness. And then he said, everything I've learned about being a man, I learned from him. And I only hope to pass that on to my own kids one day. Everyone clapped. People wiped their eyes. My father's chest swelled. And then came the knife. My father took the mic and smiled. You know, I always said it. Ryan's the child that makes a man feel like he's done something right. It's one thing to have kids. It's another to raise someone who makes you proud. He looked straight at me without saying my name. My stomach dropped. My heart burned in my chest like acid. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed how brutal that was. But they were all smiling, nodding, clapping. That was the moment. The moment I knew this wasn't a bad day. It was my life. I left before dinner was served. No one followed me out. Standing in front of the mirror, I straightened the lapels of my blazer for the 4th time. My hands were trembling. It had been 8 years since I'd moved out, yet somehow, stepping into that luxurious golf club for Dad's 60th birthday party made me feel like the same insecure girl who'd always been overlooked. Tonight wasn't just another family gathering. It felt like the final test to prove whether anything had changed. I took a deep breath and entered the lavishly decorated ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting golden reflections on elegantly dressed guests. Soft music floated through the air, mingling with the sound of polite conversation and champagne glasses clinking. Ryan stood near the entrance, the confident host, shaking hands and charming everyone who walked in. He glanced my way and offered only a brief, perfunctory nod. I felt my chest tighten, but forced myself to walk forward. The evening was for Dad, not Ryan, and certainly not me. I reminded myself of the small thank you speech I'd rehearsed on the drive over, hoping, foolishly, maybe, that tonight would be different, that maybe I'd finally be seen. As I approached my parents, Dad stood surrounded by his golf buddies and old co-workers, laughter booming around him. Mom, regal in her sapphire gown, held a glass of champagne and wore her favorite diamond necklace, the one she only brought out for important family moments. She caught my eye, smiled faintly, then immediately turned her attention back to Ryan, who was now proudly recounting his latest promotion. I lingered at the edge of the circle, waiting politely for an opening. After a pause that stretched too long, Dad finally noticed me. "Mara," he said, surprised, as if I'd shown up uninvited. "You actually made it." "Of course, Dad," I replied quietly, my heart sinking at the flatness in his voice. Ryan stepped forward, slinging an arm over my shoulder, like we were still kids playing catch in the backyard. "Glad you could join us, Mara," he announced loudly enough for the group to hear. "It's rare you come out from that little workshop of yours these days." A few people chuckled softly. My face flushed, a warm wave of embarrassment flooding me. Before I could reply, Ryan added, his voice tinged with mock encouragement, "Well, at least tonight you're finally around successful people. Who knows, maybe you'll get inspired to try something real." Laughter again. Polite, shallow, and sharp. I recognized the sting beneath the surface. This wasn't teasing, it was tradition. My humiliation had always been entertainment. Dad didn't correct him. He didn't scold Ryan. Instead, he clapped him on the back, eyes shining. "Speaking of success," he said to the group, his voice rising, "did Ryan mention he's now vice president, youngest in the firm's history?" Applause rippled through the room like a standing ovation. And me? I stood there like a coat rack, forgotten. Again, my words, my rehearsed speech, died in my throat. I stepped back, each breath harder than the last. It was painfully clear. Nothing had changed. My years of effort, the work I had done to build a life of my own, none of it mattered in this room. And then, like a quiet lifeline in the crowd, came a soft touch on my shoulder. It was Aunt Helen, the only person in our family who had ever truly looked at me without comparing me to Ryan. "Mara," she said gently, her eyes kind, "you don't have to stand here and take this. They may never understand your value, but that doesn't mean you don't have it." Her words struck a chord deep inside me, unraveling a knot I didn't even know I was still holding. I looked at her, blinking back tears. "Thank you, Aunt Helen," she smiled. "You've already proven yourself. They just don't know where to look." At that moment, something shifted. Not in the room, in me. A clarity, sharp and cold, swept over me. Why had I spent so long trying to earn recognition from people who refused to see me? Why did I measure my worth by their silence? This night wasn't a tragedy, it was a turning point. Without fanfare, without bitterness, I turned and walked out of the ballroom. The night air hit my skin like a blessing. Cold, crisp, clean. As I stood under the stars, something deep inside settled. A decision long overdue had finally taken root. I would no longer chase what they would never give, their praise, their pride. It was a currency I no longer needed. From now on, my success would speak for itself, and it would speak loudly. even if I didn't say a word. It was the summer after high school graduation. While most of the girls in my class were shopping for dorm essentials, planning road trips with roommates, or posing with college acceptance letters on Instagram, I was working two part-time jobs, one at a gas station, the other stocking shelves during the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store. I didn't complain. I was saving every dollar I could, hoping that maybe one day I'd be able to build something of my own. College wasn't an option, not because I didn't get in, but because it was clear I wouldn't be supported. Not like Ryan would be. By then, my relationship with my parents had settled into a kind of quiet civility. Not warmth, just routine. I wasn't shouted at or insulted. I was simply excluded. The kind of exclusion that doesn't leave scars, but leaves you hollow. One Saturday afternoon, my father came home from his weekly golf game. He was unusually cheerful. He tossed his keys on the counter and called out from the kitchen, "Mara, come in here for a second." I froze. My hands were still red from scrubbing metal shelves at work. I nearly dropped the grocery bag I was unpacking. He rarely said my name, rarely needed anything from me, except maybe to take a picture of him and Ryan. I stepped into the living room, and he gestured toward the leather chair across from him, like it was some official summit. "There's an opening at my company," he said, fingers laced, like he was making a business deal. "Entry level, pays well enough, solid benefits. You'd be working under one of my friends from college. Sharp guy." I blinked. My heart started to race. It wasn't my dream, but it was something. A real job, a foot in the door, maybe even, just maybe, a sign that he saw me. "I told him I'd have you send in your resume," he added. "They need someone who's reliable, not flaky. Someone who won't embarrass me." I swallowed my surprise and nodded quickly. "Thank you, I can send it over tonight." His eyes barely met mine. "Send it by 8, don't screw this up." I didn't. I spent hours fine-tuning every bullet point. I rewrote my part-time cashier job to sound like project management. I listed my freelance design gigs, made them sound like client branding consultations. I double-checked grammar 3 times. At 7:03 p.m., I hit send. 2 days later, I asked casually, while helping my mom with the dishes, if Dad had heard anything back. She didn't even look up. He said they picked someone else. "Sorry, honey." I blinked. That was it. The next evening, I asked him directly. "They wanted someone more polished," he said flatly. "More experience." It wasn't personal. But it was personal. Everything was. Something in my gut didn't sit right. A few days later, I ran into Brian, one of Dad's golf buddies, at the gas station. He waved me over, grinning. "Hey, congrats on your brother joining the firm." He told me he starts Monday. I blinked. "Wait, what?" He tilted his head. "At your dad's company? Ryan didn't tell you. They've got him in the development program. Big step." My hands went cold. My legs locked. I forced a smile and rang up his gas without another word. So that was it. The job wasn't meant for me. It never had been. It was always going to be Ryan. He had just wrapped up his first year of college, partied through finals, spent most weekends on campus golf tournaments, hadn't worked a single day in his life. And the opportunity landed in his lap like a birthday present. No resume, no rush. Number 703 email with trembling hands. I didn't confront my father. What would be the point? He'd deny it, or worse, justify it. "Ryan just fits better with the company culture. You're more creative, artsy. Maybe this isn't your lane." That night, I walked 4 miles to the gas station for my night shift. I didn't listen to music. I didn't call a friend. I just walked, head down, wondering how many times a person could be passed over before they stop expecting anything at all. At 10 p.m., I clocked in and stocked drinks in the cooler. I wiped down counters no one cared about. I cleaned a microwave that hadn't worked in months. And while I was scrubbing a coffee stain that wouldn't fade, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I was done. Done pretending that effort would somehow equal love. done believing that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, earned more, they'd finally look at me and say, "We're proud of you too." Number I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to break anything, but I would build something. A future that didn't need their permission. A life they couldn't claim credit for. I whispered the promise to myself that night, somewhere between the freezer aisle and the mop bucket. One day, they'll realize what they gave away, and I'll already be too far gone. After the night of Dad's birthday party, something inside me cracked, but not in a destructive way, more like the kind of break a bone goes through before it heals stronger. I didn't slam doors, I didn't write angry letters, I just stopped showing up. No more birthdays, no more holidays. I stopped calling, I stopped checking in. And the strangest part, no one noticed. At first, that silence was the sharpest cut. It echoed louder than any insult I'd ever heard. But slowly, painfully, it began to feel like something else. Space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to figure out who I was without being cast as a background character in Ryan's highlight reel. By day, I was still doing mechanic gigs, fixing up old cars, working in auto shops, handling custom design jobs when they came through. But at night, I started leaning into something I'd always loved, but never dared to believe in. Writing. I'd always been the quiet girl who journaled in the corner, who designed flyers for school events, who built mini blogs no one read. But one night, alone in my cramped apartment, I watched a video about a woman who turned her blog into a six-figure online business. It didn't look glamorous. She wasn't famous, but she was free, and that was all I wanted. That night, I stayed up until 4 a.m., researching everything. Affiliate marketing, course creation, copywriting, funnel psychology. I wasn't trying to get rich. I just wanted something that belonged to me. Within a week, I launched my first website. It was ugly. The fonts didn't match, the layout was a mess, but it was mine. I called it The Garage Thinker, a quiet middle finger to all those years I was told that's where I belonged. Hidden, out of the way, among tools, not people. I started freelancing, product descriptions, email sequences, blog posts for wellness brands. I got ghosted, I got rejected, but I got better. And one day someone noticed. His name was Marcus, a veteran copywriter who ran a small mentorship group. We met in a Reddit thread, of all places. I had left a detailed comment breaking down why a certain landing page failed to convert, and the next day, he DM'd me. "Whoever you are, you've got a dangerous brain. Want in on something real?" I thought it was a scam, but something told me to say yes. Marcus wasn't a guru. He didn't care that I'd never graduated from college or had a big name on my resume. In fact, he liked that. "You've been overlooked for so long. You know how to work in the dark," he said once. Most people only know how to show off. Under Marcus's guidance, I stopped chasing little wins and started building systems. I learned about psychology, persuasion, strategy, how to write words that moved people, not just to feel, but to act. 18 months later, The Garage Thinker had turned into a consulting brand. I was earning more in a single quarter than I used to in a whole year, but no one knew. Not my parents, not even my old friends. I didn't post about it. No champagne photos, no bragging tweets, just quiet wins, stacking. I moved into a loft in the city, nothing fancy, but full of light. I paid off my car, I started investing. I hired a virtual assistant. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving, I was building. But more than the money was the peace. I stopped flinching when family holidays came and went. I didn't feel a pang when I saw Instagram photos of my parents at Ryan's award ceremonies. I didn't feel small, I felt safe. Then the calls started coming. First, a voicemail from Mom. "Just wondering how you are, hope you're well." Then a text from Dad. "Ryan has some big news coming up. Would be great if you could join us." I didn't respond. Then, finally, a call from Aunt Helen. "They're starting to notice," she said gently. "They're worried, confused." "They should be," I replied. "They raised a daughter they never knew. It's not that they didn't love you, Mara. It's that they only had room to love someone who looked like success to them, I said quietly. And for a long time, I didn't. There it was. For years, I had been the invisible daughter, the quiet one, the backup, the safety net. Now I was something else entirely. Not bitter, not broken, just out of reach. I had become the one they couldn't control, the one they couldn't guilt or flatter or pull back into the fold with hollow compliments and belated invitations. And deep down, I knew they felt it, but they still didn't know what I had built in their absence. Not yet. It had been nearly 3 years since I'd last seen my family. 3 years since Dad's 60th birthday party, the night I finally understood that some wounds don't close. You simply learn to live around them. 3 years since I walked away without slamming a door, without yelling or pleading. Just quiet, steady distance. In that time, my life had become something I never imagined it could be. I'd grown my small digital freelancing hustle into a consulting brand. I had 3 remote employees, a stream of recurring clients, and I was earning more in a single quarter than I'd once made in 2 years. But more than the money, I had something I'd never truly had before: freedom. No more comparison, no more shrinking myself for family dinners, no more reaching for people who only ever reached back when they needed something. I had peace, purpose, and finally pride. So when the envelope arrived in my mailbox, thick, ivory-colored, embossed with gold leaf, I almost laughed. It was a wedding invitation. Ryan Mitchell and Claire Bennett request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. I ran my fingers over the raised gold lettering for a long time. There was no note from my parents, no follow-up text, just a formal card, like nothing had ever happened. I didn't know Claire well. We'd met once at a holiday event years ago. She was polite, perfectly poised, the kind of woman who could smile through discomfort and still keep her lipstick perfect. She came from old money. The merger of her family's firm and my father's company must have felt like destiny to my parents. A power couple in every sense. I left the invitation on my kitchen counter for days. I didn't RSVP, I didn't plan to go. And then the call came, not from Mom, not from Dad, from Ryan. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mara," he said brightly, like we were childhood best friends instead of estranged siblings. "It's been a while." I stayed silent. "I wanted to call personally," he continued. "Claire really hopes you'll come. I mean, I do too, obviously. But she said it would mean a lot to the family." I waited, then asked evenly, "Did you ever apologize?" A pause. "For what?" I didn't answer. The silence stretched long and sharp. "Look, I know things got tense," he said finally, "but we're adults now. This wedding's a big deal. There's going to be press, investors, extended family. It's going to be, well, kind of a spectacle." And there it was. It wasn't about reconnecting. It was about image, optics, the illusion of a close-knit family. They wanted me there not because they missed me, but because I completed the portrait. "Mara," Ryan added, voice tightening, "you've been off the grid. No one knows what you're doing these days. It'd be nice to show face, represent the family." I hung up. No yelling, no theatrics, just a click. The wedding was held at a private vineyard 2 hours outside the city. An over-the-top affair, drone footage, press photographers, champagne waterfalls, everything perfectly curated, perfectly hollow. I arrived 5 minutes before the ceremony. Black dress, low heels, no designer tags, no grand entrance. I didn't come to celebrate. I came to finish something. As I walked through the garden gates, heads turned. Some people whispered. Others stared like they were trying to remember who I was. Like they hadn't erased me from every photo album after I stopped showing up. "Is that Mara? She looks different. Didn't she move away or something?" I took a seat near the back. Watched the ceremony like someone watching a performance they never auditioned for. Ryan looked every bit the polished groom. Claire was radiant. She looked toward the back once, caught my eyes, and for a brief second, her expression shifted. Was it pity? Recognition? Maybe guilt? After the ceremony, during cocktail hour, Dad finally approached me, champagne in hand, smile on his face, that kind of cautious warmth people use when approaching a dog they used to kick. "Mara," he said. "Glad you made it." I nodded. "Didn't think I would, did you?" He hesitated. "Well, your brother really wanted you here. And your mother, she's been asking about you." "I'm sure she has," I said, flat. There was a pause, then he added, "I've heard you're doing something online, a business, websites or writing, or—" I almost laughed. Instead, I reached into my clutch and handed him a folded printout. It was a Forbes article. "Anonymous entrepreneur, garage thinker, crosses seven-figure milestone." No name, no photo. Just the story of a woman who built her life quietly, steadily, and completely, far from the shadows she was raised in. I looked him in the eye and said, "You're welcome to keep it. Just don't tell anyone we're related. I built this life without your help, and I'd like to keep it that way." He stared down at the article, brow furrowed, confused, speechless. I walked away. Later, Ryan cornered me near the dessert table. "You know," he said, still trying to wear that effortless charm, "you could say a few words, make a toast. People would love to hear from you." I smiled. "I already did." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly and said, "Just not the kind you can hear." And then I walked out. No slamming doors, no goodbyes, just silence, the kind that echoes louder than applause. Weeks passed after the wedding. I didn't expect a phone call. I certainly didn't expect anyone showing up. But one Saturday afternoon, there she was, my mother, standing on my porch, holding a Tupperware container of lasagna like it was a peace treaty. Her eyes scanned my face, like she was searching for someone she used to know. I stayed silent. "I read the article," she finally said. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "We didn't know how much you were carrying," she said, voice soft. "Your father, he regrets a lot. So do I. I just thought maybe we could talk." I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just looked at her, really looked, at the woman who had watched me fade from her table, her photos, her memory. And for once, I wasn't the one trying to fill the silence. I took the lasagna gently from her hands. "Thanks," I said. Then I closed the door, calm, steady. No explosion, no emotional monologue, no revenge. Just the kind of boundary that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. From the window, I watched her hesitate on the porch, holding her arms like a child trying to stay warm. Then she turned and left. And I felt nothing but peace. Because true justice isn't about dramatic exits or cruel comebacks. Real justice is becoming everything they said you couldn't. It's building a life so whole, so grounded, that their absence no longer feels like a wound, just space. And when they come looking for you, you don't need to scream. You don't even need to speak. You simply don't let them back in. Because you don't owe anyone a second chance to hurt you again. Not even your family. If this story resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.